Thanks to COVID-19, the last few years have proven to be downright brutal, and not just because of the virus. Rather, another unfortunate side effect of the pandemic was how certain people were treated, namely those who did not mask up and did not socially distance and refused not to congregate. Well, those people were demonized and vilified. And for someone who refused to get vaccinated, well, he or she was looked upon as the second coming of Typhoid Mary. Two-tier citizenship had arrived in Canada, and many paid a steep price indeed for taking a rebel stance. And that would include my next guest, former Ontario MPP Randy Hillier, someone who was heavily fined during the COVID lockdown period, and someone who was forced out of caucus by Premier Doug Ford for refusing to get jabbed with an experimental vaccine. The good news, as he fights his fines, Randy has scored some impressive victories in various courts of law lately, and that's something to celebrate. So hi there, Randy. How you been doing, my friend?
Well, I've been doing well in this bizarre and authoritarian world, a world where justice is not easy to find these days, David. And
Indeed.
I had a total of $2.5 million in potential fines levied against me and up to 25 years in jail. About 10 of those charges have been withdrawn. There's still about another dozen left being battled. And two of those charges are constitutional arguments, which will begin to be heard in April of this year in the Toronto courts, so in the Superior Court. And then, of course, I still have 9 trumped-up criminal charges against me as a result of my presence in Ottawa last year. So, and those have been the Crown in Ottawa, in my humble estimation, is trying doggedly to either bankrupt me or incarcerate me to keep me silent with the way they're proceeding in Ottawa. I do have a change of venue motion in Ottawa that will be heard in April, and I hope we'll be successful and have the matter heard outside of that bizarre jurisdiction.
I think that's prudent legal advice, the change of venue, Randy. I don't think you could get a fair shake in our nation's capital, unfortunately. But things first, on the positive side, 10 charges have been withdrawn. Randy, first of all, can you tell us what the charges were for and what the basis was for the charges being withdrawn?
Well, most of the charges have been withdrawn in that, some crowns in some jurisdictions in Ontario are now realizing that it's not in the public interest to proceed to continue. The laws that were allegedly broken during the No More Lockdown rallies, which we had all across the province, that law no longer is on the books. So many of the crowns are being reasonable and sensible and saying, well, the law doesn't exist anymore. There's really no benefit to continue with the prosecution. It's not as if I need to be penalized further because I can't go out and break that law or allegedly break that law anymore because that law doesn't exist. So, I do think it's important that we recognize that there are some Crown attorneys in jurisdictions in Ontario that are acting responsibly and reasonably, where others are still beside themselves with fear, beside themselves with vindictiveness and seeking retribution for these alleged violations of the Reopening Ontario Act.
And Randy, I think the last time I saw you in the flesh, it might have been 2 years ago. It was in Peterborough. I think it was the month of April. you and Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party of Canada, and yours truly, we were all fined that day, even though there was, if memory serves, there must have been over 1,000 people there not wearing masks, not socially distancing. So what are the odds that the law enforcement in Peterborough goes after politicians and I guess journalists who are asking impolite questions? I would say the odds against that would make even the most reckless gambler cringe. Randy, I had my day in court last year. I was found guilty, even though I was doing what the mainstream media was doing that day, covering the protests. But I guess there's two different sets of standards. Have you had your day in court in Peterborough yet?
No, that one is still the way. Peterborough has still been one of the more belligerent or aggressive jurisdictions, along with Windsor, Ottawa, of course, Elgin County as well. There are some hot spots, some spots where they just don't want to let go. They don't want to admit their errors. They don't want to admit their mistakes. They want to get their pound of flesh, regardless if it is an abuse of justice, regardless if it's brings the administration of justice into disrepute. They want their pound of flesh. So hopefully, like I said, I'm hopeful that as time goes on and ever more evidence is revealed that these laws were unnecessary, these laws were a violation of our fundamental freedoms, these laws actually caused more harm than they could have ever alleviated. So, that is what the facts and the evidence demonstrate to us clearly now. Even if it wasn't that clear to some people a year and 2 years ago, it is beyond any reasonable doubt that the measures employed with these mandates were more harmful than good, caused more injury than they saved, and violated every fundamental freedom that Canadians hold dear.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest, either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. We rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.